Welcome back, everyone, to another reaction video. Well, some of you are probably aware that I've been appearing on the History Channel on the show Unbelievable with Dan Aykroyd, and one of the episodes in which I appear is an episode dedicated to stories of revenge from history. So I thought this is a topic we could dive into a little bit more. And so this is the channel Serious History, and it's extreme stories of revenge from history. Now, I don't know if any of the same stories that were covered in my video on the History Channel will be covered in this one, but we'll find out. I haven't watched it yet. So link is in the description so you can check out Serious History and see all of their other content. This is a channel we'll definitely be looking at more. He's got some very interesting videos, some topics we haven't previously covered that I think would be interesting to take care of. So let's go ahead and dive into this one.
Today, we're going over the most brutal stories of revenge in human history. Number 1, Olga and the Drevlians.
So right off the bat, we're diving into a story that I did actually talk about on the History Channel. And I think this is one of the most incredible stories from history, and it's compounded by the fact that the woman later became a saint in the Eastern Orthodox Church.
We're starting this list with quite possibly one of the greatest ride-or-die stories in human history.
1000%.
When Olga of Kiev led one of the most terrifying and calculated tours of revenge following the brutal execution of her husband. It's the year 945, and Prince Igor is ruling over Kievan Rus, an empire that once stretched over modern-day Ukraine, Bulgaria, and a bit of Russia. To his west lived the Drevlians, a tribe who actually kind of hated the Kievan Rus, but occasionally fought alongside them against the Byzantine Empire. When Igor's father Oleg dies in 912, the Drevlians see it as an opportunity to finally stop paying their tribute, aka their forced protection money, to these assholes in Kiev. Igor patiently waits for his money for 33 years until finally deciding, you know what? 34 years would be just too long.
And this is one of those things when you know the story in hindsight, you think to yourself, okay, maybe there's a way to go about this. And Igor, obviously he wants his taxes, and it initially kind of goes well, but I think he kind of pushes the envelope a little too far and he pays for it.
And personally travels to the Drevlian capital city of Korostin to collect his money himself. He rode into the city with a large army and demanded tribute, which the Drevlians begrudgingly paid.
Right, and that could have been the end of the story right there. Like that would have been it.
And that should have been the end of it, and Igor should have gone on to live a long, happy life. But on his ride home, he feels the tribute was just a little too small. So he turns around with a few of his men and heads back to Korostin to demand more.
How many times in history, we talk about this a lot, are there stories where in hindsight we can look and say, you know what, you should have known when enough was enough. You should have known when not to push it that little bit extra. But history's full of stories of people who didn't know when they had gone too far until it was too late.
When Igor arrives back at the city and begins shouting his demands, the Drevlians surprisingly do not like this and immediately kill his men. Igor was saved for an extra horrific execution. The Drevlians bent 2 birch trees toward each other and tied one of Igor's legs to each tree. Once Igor's legs were fastened, they cut the supports and the trees snapped back to their original form, ripping Igor into 2 pieces.
Now, there are not many stories of this from history, but I have to believe that this is not the first time this had ever happened. It probably just hadn't been written about very often, but different cultures have different, very creative ways in which to execute people. Because when you were doing this, it wasn't just about punishing or killing that person. It was about the message that it was sending to other people.
The Drevlians' ruler, Prince Mal, was now feeling pretty good about himself and set his sights on taking over the larger empire.
Now, speaking of taking things too far, Prince Mal should have stopped right there, okay? The guy was killed, let it go. The guts, the gall that it takes to immediately then propose marriage to the widow of the guy that your people just horribly killed is beyond me.
By marrying Igor's widow, Olga. And this is where things all went downhill for the Drevlians, because Olga, she was the wrong person to mess with.
100%. This was not about love. This is not about, ooh, Olga's beautiful and I really want to marry her because I'm in love with her. No, this was about consolidating power for Prince Mal.
Prince Mal sends 20 of his best ambassadors to Kiev to inform Olga what had happened to her husband, and to propose that she marry him to combine their territory. Surprisingly, she seems to take this news well and tells the messengers that they should go back to their boat to rest for now, and that tomorrow her men would bring them back to the city to get her.
What amazes me about this story is not just that Olga is getting revenge repeatedly, it's how much thought and calculated rage goes into this. Like, she could have just had these guys killed right on the spot, but she's like, wait a day. And then, like, it's all very, very intensely planned out.
The next morning, Olga's men walk down to the shore to get the ambassadors, but instead of just leading them into the city, they pick up their entire boat with all 20 men still in it. The ambassadors are blown away by this hospitality. What service? They're being treated like royalty. Until the ride suddenly got really bumpy.
Can I just throw it out there that somebody in Hollywood needs to make a movie about this whole thing? Because, it just is laid out so beautifully, like a Hollywood plot.
See, all through the night, Olga had her men digging a huge trench, and when her men arrived with the Drevlian ambassadors, she ordered them to dump the boat and all the men on board into this huge hole. She then orders them to bury these messengers alive. The Drevlians can do nothing as dirt is slowly piled on them, and soon they're buried alive. But Olga was just getting started.
Do you ever watch one of those infomercials and then repeatedly they're like, but wait, there's more? That's happening like 5 times in this story.
She then sends her own messengers to Koristan to ask Prince Mal to send his most distinguished men to Kiev to escort his soon-to-be bride. The Drevlians, not knowing what happened to the first group, comply and send a party of lords and powerful men as escorts.
And my understanding is this isn't just a random party of lords. Like, they're picking out the top people from all of the villages that the Drevlians control. So this is not just killing a bunch of important people. This is a leadership decapitation is what's happening here. Send me all the best people from all of your villages.
When they arrive in Kiev, Olga tells these distinguished guests to relax in a bathhouse her men had prepared, and that she would meet with them after they've freshened up.
Yeah, you're traveling, you're dirty, it's been a long day. Here, relax. And they're set completely at ease. There's no reason to think there's a problem.
Her men lead the Drevlian nobles to the bathhouse, and once they're in, her men lock the doors and set the bathhouse and all the men inside on fire.
But wait, there's more.
It then sends more messengers to Koristan, asking Prince Mal to prepare for her arrival. She has one request. She wants a feast to mourn her late husband before the marriage.
This is also calculated, and she's doing this in rapid succession to make sure that news doesn't get back to Prince Mal about what has really transpired, so that they can stay ahead of it.
The Drevlians, again, not really knowing what's going on in Kiev, prepare a grand feast for Olga. She arrives, the party begins, and she encourages the Drevlians to drink and mourn with her. They do, and by the end
It's like the Red Wedding, but it's the Red Funeral.
Night, the Drevlians are all properly hammered. Olga then orders her men to begin killing the now drunk and defenseless Drevlians. Surprise! Her men were sandbagging their drinks the whole night and were stone cold sober. Historians say Olga was seen cheering her men on as they went around slaughtering thousands of Drevlians.
Yeah, they killed like 5,000 people that night. 5,000 of them.
Including Prince Mal himself. Olga then returned to Kiev to raise an army to finish
But wait, there's more!
them off once and for all. The Drevlians finally catch the hint that Olga maybe wasn't too fond of them when she returned to Koristan with a massive army and began a siege on the city. For over a year, the citizens of Koristan suffered with little food or supplies, until finally Olga sends a message saying basically, if you just pay your tribute, this can all be over.
And all I want is not gold, nothing fancy. This is all so well thought out.
Been already fooled 3 times, and not really wanting to be fooled again, the Drevlians say they will pay the tribute, but are scared that Olga will still kill them. She responds and was like, oh, I know I got a little crazy there after Igor, but it's fine now. Just send me 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows from each house, and I'll go away. The Drevlians think this is a weird request, but are so relieved that their nightmare is finally coming to an end that they quickly go out and find the birds to give her. That night, Olga has her men tie a small piece of sulfur bundled in cloth to each bird's leg. They set fire to the cloth and release the birds into the night. Olga and her men watch 1,000 tiny embers fly off into the distance, and the birds go straight to their nests built on buildings in Koristan. Within hours, the entire city is a fiery hellscape. Olga watched the city burn to the ground and later claimed all Drevlian territory for herself. So yeah, they really should have just paid the tribute.
Yeah.
And
so what happens later on in Olga's life is that you got to remember, this is a time in history when Christianity has not spread to a lot of these places. And in fact, places like Kiev and Rus are very heavily influenced by Viking culture. And so later on, Olga actually converts to Christianity, and then she comes back to what is now Ukraine and converts a lot of that territory to Christianity. And so she has been made a saint in the Eastern Orthodox Church, because she's basically like the Saint Patrick of Ukraine. She's the main reason why the people of that territory end up Christians. She spends some time in Byzantium, and it's really pretty fascinating that this woman who has such a body count to her name ends up a saint in the church.
Number 2, Caesar and the Pirates.
Oh, yeah. We didn't
story
do this one. We should have done this one on the History Channel. This is a fantastic story.
Is one where I actually feel kind of a little sorry for the would-be bad guys. It's the year 75 BCE, and a 25-year-old Roman nobleman named Julius Caesar was sailing the Aegean Sea heading to Rhodes. Along the way, his ship is boarded by Sicilian pirates, and Julius is taken captive. Now, becoming a hostage is usually a terrifying situation for most people, but in this case, I think the pirates knew right from the start they might have made a huge mistake.
And these pirates at this time in history, this is still the Roman Republic. This is Julius Caesar, while he's born into this noble family, this patrician family. He's not the rich and powerful Julius Caesar of, say, 20 years later. At this point, he hasn't won all these great victories in Gaul. He does, I think at this point he is already or is about to be made Pontifex Maximus, which is a really significant religious role. But pirates were a big deal at this time in the Mediterranean, and they were almost like a small nation unto themselves. There were thousands of them, and they would often band together, and they were really difficult for the Roman Republic to deal with.
The pirates take a look at Caesar with his fancy clothes and entourage and realize he's probably somebody important. So they set a ransom for 20 talents, worth around $2 million today, give or take $1 million. When Caesar hears this number, he's offended and demands that they up the ransom to 50 talents.
Only 20? Come on, I'm worth way more than that.
He sends his entourage to gather the money to buy his freedom, and he would remain as the pirates' hostage until they came back with the money. The pirates then sail off with Caesar and just a few of his men to their island hideout. Now, aboard the pirate ship, Caesar simply refuses to be a prisoner. In fact, the entire time he's held hostage, he acts as if they were all on his ship, and these pirates are his men. He freely walks around the ship, eats with the pirates, joins in on their games, and even exercises with them. He shushes them to be quiet when they're being noisy, and every day he forces them to listen to the speeches and poems he's working on. And that is why the Senate's power is but an illusion, maintained merely by tradition and weak men. Rome needs a leader who can see beyond petty politics and guide her to true greatness.
In 75 BC, this is also right in the aftermath of when Rome has had a civil war. This guy Sulla comes along and completely lays the groundwork for what's going to happen with Caesar and his civil wars a generation later.
Perhaps even by force if necessary. You guys are all fucking idiots, aren't you? The pirates were confused, as they never had a prisoner behave in such a strange way, but they put up with Caesar because he was kind of charismatic, and he was also kind of their ticket to a huge payday.
Yep.
It's also worth mentioning that throughout his time as a hostage, Caesar would joke that one day he would crucify them all for this. Once you guys let me go, I'm gonna find you guys and crucify every single one of you. I'm totally serious. You're all gonna be so sorry.
He's totally serious.
38 days later, Caesar's men return with the 50 talents, and Caesar is set free. The pirates sail back to their island base with their huge jackpot to get drunk, having achieved financial independence.
Yeah, understand that while Caesar is setting these men at ease, even while speaking the truth about what he's going to do to them, he's also probably getting information and learning about where and when and how to get at them.
Caesar, however, did no such relaxing, and immediately he goes out, raises a small army, and sails right back to the pirates' island. He takes back the 50 talents his men had just given them for the ransom and captures every single one of the pirates who held him captive. Caesar then crucified all of them, just like he promised. To Caesar's credit, he actually did grow a little fond of these pirates, so he slit their throats first to prevent them from suffering for a long time. What a nice guy. Number 3.
Listen, crucifixion, there's a reason why we have the word excruciating to mean horrible pain. It comes from the root word of crucifixion. Because crucifixion was a horrible way to die. You'd be up there for days, and birds are pecking out your eyeballs, and you're struggling to breathe, and eventually your body is in such a state that you have to push up on the nails in your feet in order to be able to exhale because of the weight that's being pressed down on your diaphragm. Eventually you suffocate to death if you don't die from some other way first. It's horrible.
The 47 Ronin. We go from pirates who were too dumb to know what was coming to a story of extreme loyalty when 47 samurai patiently waited for 2 years to avenge the death of their fallen master. This story begins...
Isn't there a movie about this with like Keanu Reeves or something?
In 1701, with 2 young daimyo named Kame and Asano, and a man named Kira, a member of the shogun's court tasked with instructing the 2 young lords in proper etiquette. Now, Kira, he was a giant douchebag, but because he was close to the shogun, he basically could get away with anything.
Proximity to power lets you have a lot of influence and a lot of protection.
The story goes that when Kame and Asano traveled to Edo, the 2 young lords brought gifts, aka bribes, that Kira felt were not big enough. So Kira pretty much spends every day calling them names and overall being a giant asshole. Both young lords were not used to being treated so poorly, but Asano does his best to maintain his composure. Kame, on the other hand, can't take it and decides to assassinate Kira himself. His counselors catch wind of this plan, and behind Kame's back pay Kira a huge bribe for him to stop. With this, Kira unknowingly saves his own life, and he begins to treat Kame much better. Asano, on the other hand, never got the memo about the bribe thing, and so Kira, now left with only one target, ramped up his insults in his direction. One fateful day, while walking together in Edo Castle, Kira is still running his mouth, calling Asano a country hick with no manners.
Like, how petty do you have to be in order to just do this? I mean, like, to build yourself up by belittling other people. I never understood that.
Asano finally snaps. He pulls out a knife and slashes at Kira, trying to shut him up for good, but he only manages to cut Kira's face before he's quickly stopped by castle guards. Drawing a weapon within Edo Castle was a serious crime, and Asano is quickly arrested. His lands are seized, and he's ordered to commit seppuku, the samurai's bloody ritual of disembowelment. Back in his domain, Asano's family loses everything, and his samurai, now masterless, are left to find their way as ronin. Kira receives no punishment and gets off nearly scot-free with just a scar on his face. Now, Kira was a prick, but he was no idiot. He knew that Asano had very loyal samurai who would probably try to defend the honor of their fallen lord, so he hires extra security and sends out spies and ninjas to track every move of the now masterless samurai. Over the next year, Asano's men seemed to move on with their lives the best they could. In this period of peace, there wasn't much demand for samurai, so they took up normal jobs. They became carpenters, blacksmiths, and merchants. The leader of Asano's men, Oishi, seemed to take the fall from grace exceptionally hard, and he began drinking heavily and visiting brothels in Kyoto. He even divorces his wife and sends his family away so he could be miserable alone. Another year passes, and much...
So, this is all the kind of the calm before the storm. This is the false sense of security. Oh, it's been long enough. If they haven't gotten revenge by now, they're certainly not going to do it. But for some people, there's no timetable on getting back.
Much to Kira's relief, none of Asano's men seem to be interested in revenge. He reduces the number of guards at his home and assumes he's in the clear. But it turns out, Kira was dead wrong. As in the darkness of night on January 31st, 1703, 47 of Asano's former samurai quietly surround his home in Edo. Asano's men had in fact not moved on. For 2 years, they had been secretly plotting their revenge against Kira and crafted an elaborate plan to defend the honor of their fallen master.
This is loyalty to a guy. The guy's been dead for 2 years, but they've been meticulously planning what they're going to do.
Going their separate ways, taking up normal jobs. Even Oishi, the actual leader of the group, acting like a drunk, was all part of an elaborate multi-year plan to fool Kira into letting his guard down.
That's awesome.
The group had stayed in contact the whole time through coded messages, and every detail of the night was planned and accounted for. Before the attack, the Ronin visit Kira's neighbors and tell them they're not burglars, simply samurai seeking to defend the honor of their fallen lord. there would be no danger for anyone else. Unsurprisingly, all of Kira's neighbors hated him too, and no one did anything.
I mean, obviously, if the guy is the way he's portrayed in this, people think he's a prick and they don't really care what happens to him.
Stop them. The Ronin take out the perimeter guards, and Oishi sends archers to climb onto Kira's roof as lookouts. With everything in place, the assault begins. Oishi beats a drum to signal his men to attack, and a group under his command stormed the front of the house, while another group led by his 16-year-old son stormed the rear. Oishi's son breaks through first, but is quickly joined by Oishi's group. The house erupts into a bloody battle, with the Ronin cutting down Kira's guards left and right. Kira's men soon realize they're no match for these samurai, and they try to send messengers to the shogun, but anyone who leaves the house is quickly shot down by the archers on the roof.
All planned.
The Ronin subdue 38 men, who are now either dead or seriously injured, but Kira himself is nowhere to be found. All hope seemed lost.
He's hiding in a hole.
Until they check his bed. It's still warm, meaning Kira couldn't have gotten far. The men continue to search until they find a secret passage behind a scroll that leads outside.
It's the Windows logo, or the Windows
Inside a small
image.
storehouse in the courtyard, the Ronin find a man cowering in the corner with a small dagger who attacks them. The samurai quickly capture this man and call for Oishi, who, using the light of a lantern, finally sees the scar that Asano had left on Kira's head 2 years ago, confirming this man's identity. Oishi bends down to his knees and respectfully tells Kira that they're simply samurai who are fulfilling their duties to their master. He explains that they'll allow him an honorable death by seppuku and hands Kira the same dagger their fallen lord Asano had used to do the same. Kira just sits there trembling, and no matter how nicely Oishi asks him to get it over with, he does nothing. Eventually, realizing this was taking way too long, Oishi grabs the dagger and cuts off Kira's head himself. As the sun rises, the Ronin begin the 6-mile journey with Kira's head to the tomb of their master at Sengakuji Temple. Along the way, word quickly spreads through the city of what had just happened, and many townsfolk who are just waking up begin running outside cheering for the samurai and offering them gifts and food as they pass. The sleepless Ronin arrive at the temple and present Kira's head and Asano's dagger before their master's tomb, fulfilling their final duty of defending his honor. They then turn themselves in to authorities, knowing that the crimes they had committed would ultimately lead to their executions as well. The shogun was now caught in a sticky situation. These Ronin were criminals, as they basically went on a murder rampage to kill one of his men. But they were also following the code of Bushido and defending the honor of their master. He ultimately decides that while the men needed to be punished, they could do so with dignity, and he allowed the Ronin to commit seppuku, a more honorable death. The Ronin were then interred in graves surrounding their master, which can still be visited today.
Really? Yeah, so I looked it up, and you can visit the gravesite today, and it looks very much like how he did it in the animation there. Pretty cool. If I ever get to Japan, that might be a site I have to check out.
4. Genghis Khan and the Khwarezmid Empire. This last story is probably history's greatest example of f*** around and find out. And like most things involving Genghis Khan, the death toll in this revenge story is crazy, so let's get right into it. In 1218, Genghis Khan sends a caravan of 450 merchants and traders to the Khwarezmian city of Otrar, hoping to expand his trade network to the west. The merchants arrive and are immediately executed by the governor of the city, a man named Inalchuk, who then steals all of the goods brought by the merchants and sells them to members of high society in the city of Bukhara. One camel driver from the caravan manages to escape, and he returns to Mongolia to tell Chinggis what had happened. Pissed off, but trying to keep his cool, Chinggis sends another small group of diplomats, 1 Muslim and 2 Mongolians, to the Shah Muhammad himself.
Could you imagine being one of the, like, they just killed a bunch of people in your situation, so we're going to send you and see what happens.
Ruler of the Khwarezmian Empire to negotiate peace. All the Shah has to do is let them take Inalchuk back to Mongolia for punishment, and everything would be all good. But instead of giving up Inalchuk, the Shah Uno reverses the envoy and kills the Muslim diplomat. He then shaves the beard of the Mongolians, which was the ultimate form of disrespect in their culture, and sends them back to Chinggis. Okay, let's see. Fuck around. Check. Now it's time to find out. Chinggis is now furious, and he quickly raises an army of 200,000 men to crush Khwarezmia. They're not messing around, and the Mongolians attack multiple cities at once. 2 of Chinggis' sons, Chagatai and Ogadai, lead a siege on Otrar to capture Inalchuk. And Chinggis personally goes to Bukhara to punish those who had taken his goods. The Mongols use new siege weapons they collected in China, and soon the walls of Bukhara are destroyed, and Chinggis rides into the heart of the city. Genghis loudly proclaims to the citizens that he was sent by God as punishment for their sins. He then orders his men to slaughter everyone in the city, only sparing artisans and craftsmen, which he took as slaves. And
all these people who are paying the price for their lord's stupidity or hubris or whatever you want to call it. But this is why, when you've got a sleeping giant, so to speak, like a guy who can call to arms 200,000 men, don't make him mad. I mean, have we learned nothing from history?
And young able-bodied men, which he took as human shields for further battles. Meanwhile, his sons were busy at work trying to crack Otrar. After 5 months of suffering, a general within the city realizes it's hopeless and decides to defect with a few thousand of his men and join the Mongols. He opens the city gates and rushes to join his new Mongolian brothers. But it turns out the Mongols don't really like traitors no matter which side they're on, and they kill the general and his men themselves. With the gates wide open, they ride into Otrar and capture Inalchuk, who fights to the end, even throwing bricks and roof tiles as a desperate last attempt when he runs out of weapons.
Nice.
Some stories say that Inalchuk was brought to Genghis, and as punishment for his greed, he had his men pour molten silver into Inalchuk's eyes and ears. After this, Genghis...
This reminds me a little bit of the story, which is probably not true, at least not while he was still alive, of gold being poured into the mouth of Crassus, who was one of the 3 triumvirs, along with Julius Caesar and Gnaeus Pompey Magnus. Probably didn't happen. He was probably killed in battle, but...
And his forces went on to destroy every city in the Khwarezmian Empire. Shah Muhammad spends the rest of his life running from the Mongols until he dies of pneumonia on a tiny island in the Caspian Sea. At the end of this revenge tour, the Khwarezmian Empire was gone, and Genghis had massacred an estimated 15 million people. To put it in perspective, that's about the population of New York City, Los Angeles, and Chicago combined.
And at that time in history, it's a significant amount of the world population that we're talking about. So, all right, that was good. I love how he puts the story together. He doesn't do a lot of humor. He's just really kind of telling it straightforward. It's a similar style. You can see the influence of channels like Salmonella, but he's doing it in a much more straightforward way, and I like it, and I thought it was good. And if there's other videos from this channel that you think I should check out, let me know in the comment section below, and we'll do that. Thanks for watching.